Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the International Digital Media Arts Festival, Deconfine. I'm extremely pleased and excited to present to you my friend, artist, filmmaker, explorer, and researcher, Vincent Moon from France.
Pleasure.
Vincent, from past 10 years, has been traveling around the world in search of sounds and images, from stadium rock music to rare shamanic rituals. What is incredible is that most of his work is shared under a Creative Commons license. He is deeply interested in experimentations with electronics and reflects greatly on the digital age we are living in. Vincent is one half of the artistic duo Petite Planet with Priscilla Delmont. Priscilla couldn't join us today, but Vincent, maybe you can present her a little bit.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kaya. A pleasure to be doing this with you. Yes, Priscilla and myself, we've been working together, I guess, for the past 8 years now. I already made films before I met her, and she already made films actually before she met me. Except she was working more for television and what you might call a more standard form of documentaries and so on, while my work was already very much on the way of alternative languages and open source data, especially. All my work has always been published for free on Creative Commons. And so we joined forces at some point to deepen our relationship, I would say, to spirituality and rituals all around the world. And she already had quite a big background in this. She studied some forms of shamanism around the world. She's a photographer. She's a writer. She's known mostly as a writer in France, actually, for her many adventures. She actually made a very beautiful book about a fantastic travel she had in the Himalayas. She crossed the Himalayas walking just by herself over 7 or 8 months, I think in 2005, something like that. And she's mostly famous for this in France. But now our research is very much dedicated to, like, how do we approach that diversity of music and the diversity of rituals around the planet, and how do we basically share this with the world at large, and share it hopefully in a very generous, open way.
On that occasion, I'll also say that we're extremely grateful to present our audiences this project. Your projects, Petite Planet, and your film Tajali, a documentary on Shahi Kawaz of Ajmer. Today, I'm also pleased to introduce you the director of Alliance Française de Bhopal, Thomas Simon, an artist and musician himself, who will be in conversation with Vincent Moon and me about his work and philosophy. Thomas, over to you.
Merci, Kaya. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I would like to start, Vincent, if you allow me, with a very simple question. Somehow, can you present a little bit the project Little Planet? Yes?
Sure, of course I can do this. I mean, I've been dedicating my life, man, to basically this. I don't see actually any, even when you say the project Petite Planet, I'm like, well, it's not even a job for me. It's like everything we do. We are completely immersed into this type of relationship with reality. Basically, at first I come from photography. I come from basically taking photos, shaping through a square, through a certain frame, my relationship to reality, and trying to embrace, I guess, an idea of how do we resublime maybe our reality? How do we change the narration? How do we change the storytelling, especially of how do we live together, of how those cultures all around the world have been evolving? And I've always been fascinated by this ability we have as modern day creators, especially with the digital age, to engage into a very responsible, subjective vision towards society. And coming from photography, basically, long story short, I started to get obsessed with music and how do we represent, how do we film music. And I wanted to probably to be a musician at first, but nonetheless, I ended up making hundreds of short films. I guess I started around 15 years ago, around 2005. there was not really any content actually specifically made for internet at the time. It was very, very new to imagine even like video content for internet. And with a friend of mine, we started a project named the Takeaway Shows for La Blogothèque. La Blogothèque being his own music blog at the time. And we filmed lots of people, mostly into the realm of indie rock, folk music, mostly with a very, I guess, lovely and naive vision of music from my angle. I come from Paris, I come from Western Europe. And from that sort of like privileged position, my relationship with music was actually very, very limited in a sense. Very rich in a way. Obviously, growing up in Paris, I was excited to go to see so many shows. I mean, I ended up probably seeing 4 or 5 concerts a week at some point in my life, and actually also very restricted, not understanding, I guess, at the time the use of music in more ancient, more traditional ways. So basically, we made lots of those films. They were always from the beginning published on internet for free, and little by little, I started to deepen my relationship with reality. I was also offered the luxury to travel a bit in different countries, and everywhere I would go, I would sort of like start to be interested in like, how do people use music in their own community? How do they like basically do not have this idea of music as an entertainment, but basically as the central link of their own way of living together? It took me a while to go through that, but basically there was a really, I guess, a good maybe bridge made from my own political upbringing, my own desire into another form of society, much more de-hierarchized, and in that relationship with what nowadays we call traditional music, or in general, I deepened more this research towards the use of music in sacred context, in spiritual context. I realized that relationship between the musician and the audience was actually much more coherent towards those research I was doing into what kind of society could we live in a sense, or in a way, there was not this distance, this basically stage or leveling of people talking together. There was a real dialogue there on the spot. And that's what I was excited about, going into the research on how do we use music? How do we basically fill this gap towards the invisible forces, give them different names depending on where you are on the planet? But how do we live with this? And how did we lose a bit of that? Only a little bit of this in the Western vision of our relationship with music, and how do we nowadays maybe find another way to go back towards this ancient way of living together and performing together. So I guess just to finish on this, is that the work we're doing with Petite Planète is very much interested in this. How do such recordings made in different parts of the world do actually reactivate imagination nowadays for our contemporary audiences, and how do we use those datas? Let's use actually that name to re-engage into a different relationship with each other. So that's why I don't see these works only at all as a work of archiving what's already existing. I guess mostly nowadays our work is really very much based on how do we create again from that, And so the idea of basically publishing this all for free, to give it to everybody the possibility to use that material to build on top of it.
Yeah, I have another really simple question following this is, where did it start? When was the first time Do you remember it? Where was it? With which community? How did you feel at that time? I guess the entire experience was quite new. Did you plan it really long time before? And how did you felt it for you to say like, did you have something in mind like, okay, I want to do that. I want to go deeper now. I really found something that I want to explore more. Do you remember that?
Well, there is basically two specific moments very clear in my mind. A bit more than 10 years ago, I was invited to follow some musicians, actually some French musicians, in a collaboration in Cairo, in Egypt. And I was supposed to spend there 2 weeks. And obviously, my workflow is very hectic, very intense. I can do a lot in very short time. And that's also a very important part of our the way we produce. We actually never really write anything in advance. We do not really work even with production money at least before we start shooting. So the idea is really to kind of like be able to improvise, to document a reality which suddenly almost appears in front of us. And so during those 2 weeks in Cairo, at some point, I really wanted to escape that project that I was sort of like commissioned for. And I did not really feel had any attachment actually to what was happening. And anyway, but one night, one of my local contacts in Cairo, someone who was more into the traditional music scene, took me to a ritual, something I did not expect. He was like, well, I want to show you, I see you're a curious person and that you want to discover new things. Well, let me show you something maybe new for you, but very old for us. And so he took me to the old streets of Cairo, and we ended up in a very, very, very small place. And I could hear the sound coming from quite far. But just before we arrived, he told me, this is actually hidden. This is actually forbidden by the local authorities. But I'm sure you will enjoy this. And actually, it took me to a Zar ritual. A Zar, Z-A-R, is a trance ritual, sort of like some you would say even pre-Islamic form of like trance relationship with music. And actually, this was only performed by women, for women. It was an incredible experience for me because I ended up in a place where music suddenly, and in a funny way, I would say, maybe for the very first time of my life, was not performed for an audience, or that was not the organization of the music. The organization of the music was much more circular in a sense that those women who are actually making this ceremony and creating with their rhythm, with their singings, this modified state of consciousness into that other person. And my own presence there was very strange suddenly. I was like, this is not supposed to be seen. This is supposed to be experimented. So I decided in the week after to come back with my own camera and ask them to perform a ritual on me. And it was an incredible experience, very subjective. And actually, it was the first film I ever made on a trance ritual. So that was just, I think, a few months before. Then I had a very deep, also shamanic experience while I was working in the Amazon forest in Colombia, actually, and which also opened me to some other realization, understanding of the use, the power of music, of vibrations. And that's something I definitely wanted to pursue, as if suddenly I was on a quest for the origins of sound and why do humankind produce sounds? In which way do we engage each other into this relationship, as I like to call it now, this dialogue with the invisible?
Thank you. Through the different films I've seen that you share on your website, thanks for that. Again, this is really something quite incredible to go through your website, see the world map, see where you guys have been. It's quite an experience. and watch the different movies, there is some vocabularies you are using right now that for me sounds familiar among all the different music. You know, you're talking about sounds, vibration. Do you see interconnections among all the different cultures about something we all search, you know, into the music, not the music for entertainment, I would say, but for the sacred music, and even maybe actually for some entertainment music that can happen. I had the chance to spend some time in Jamaica, in some sound system over there, where music is actually kind of almost a religious ritual for them. So where do you see the link in between all those cultures and the research for vibration, for the relation with something like sacred?
Well, you touched the right spot, you know, especially talking about those sound systems in Jamaica, because actually it's everywhere. This link is everywhere all the time, and still very much there nowadays, except we do not see it maybe, or we do not pay enough attention to it. But obviously, take the club scene in Berlin, for example, you know, maybe the best example you could find of a very, very, very strong club scene nowadays in Europe. Well, this is actually so close to basically those ancient forms of trance rituals I was describing. That there is definitely the same quest, and the quest is still on, and there is no end. You know, this is actually my understanding. We're talking about something which is at the very, very core of our relationship with reality. This is not something you do on weekends, as entertainment, as just on the side. This is not something as our society is trying to make us believe now of second importance, you know, or like this is actually the very core of life to me, of why we live together. And so obviously we will see this relationship with the, I would say, other bodies in the same space engaged into an adventure, a modified state of consciousness linked adventure, where basically you use music or not. I mean, silence is also a powerful way to get into a modified state. But basically, this has been everywhere all the time, and it will continue to be. And I think it's very, very important for us, and actually, especially maybe for what we do with Priscilla, to kind of like try to have the spotlight on that aspect. I'm referring here to especially what we're doing in terms of live performances and so on. Because if you go on internet and you see this massive archive, it's I mean, it's crazy. It's a mess. You know, we made more than 800 films, all for free. It's a very subjective relationship with reality, obviously, but still, it acts as basically, oh, look at how beautiful is extraordinary diversity around them. Well, the problematic with such a thinking is that obviously we might end up, as we do on a larger global scale nowadays, with lots of tensions in between those diverse identities. And that's I think very, very important point of thinking that has switched in my mind, especially in contact with I would say the most beautiful, or at least the most preserved, indigenous cosmology, that it all comes from the same place, and it will probably all end up at the same place. We're just in a very, very interesting time of tensions in between all those experiences all around the world, and we have a hard time to see how much they are the same. I'm talking actually, yes, about a Sufi ritual in Chechnya, a shamanic gathering deep in the Amazon, a church mass here in Paris, or even some other, and many, many other expressions, you know. Some of them might not seem referred to any religious experience, but they do all share a spiritual link. We've been researching a lot on, especially on the writings of Carl Jung, the famous Swiss psychoanalyst from the 20th century, especially toward the end of his life, because it definitely deepens that understanding, and especially in what he calls the unus mundus. The unus mundus being this idea of the unified field of reality, which actually is at the very core of the reality we live in nowadays, which is very much related to some recent researches in quantum physics and so on, and which is also very much related to some extremely old wisdom in shamanic knowledges. So basically, I think we're in a very difficult time in terms of the way we relate to the others, especially if they don't look like us nowadays. I think the world we live in terms of the mass medias and so on, is pushing us towards that understanding that those differences should give birth to more and more distances in between people. Well, I truly strongly disagree with that, and we try to propose, like obviously many other people around us, another alternative to that, to celebrate those differences and bringing them together in a different dance, because that's all it is. It's a different form of dance all the time.
We had a quick talk last week in order to prepare this moment of exchange in between the three of us. Thank you, Kayal, once again. And I was starting to talk about somehow the side effect of the globalization and the fact that all those cultures, those really brilliant cultures that are really old cultures with a lot of tradition, with like songs that come from centuries ago, ways to experiment music that come from really, really old time, that might also disappear. And I start to use with you this word of archiving, like as I was telling you, like for me, it's true that for me, what you were doing was also somehow a way to preserve some tradition. And you were like telling me, I do not really agree with this term of archiving. We are not just doing this. This is way beyond this, right? But then how would you say that actually this digital age is helping to reawake the spirituality? Can you tell a little bit more about this, and how actually do you see the internet in this practice, in your practice? What is the place of that?
It's a deep question, mon ami, and it's not an easy time to ask how to put good spirit on internet now. You know, we have been seeing, especially in the past few weeks and months, the decay of our society through the use we've been doing of new technologies, definitely. And so it's a very hard, it's a very tricky thing nowadays to think, how do we actually see the benefits of this digital age now? How do we actually understand that this has been triggering also some very powerful new forms of relationships in between people who are so far from each other? Regarding the archive, let me start there maybe. My understanding is that this relationship we have with the archive is so much obsessed with death, with the idea of death, but seen from a very, sorry to say, very Western perspective, that we're a bit trapped into this understanding. I've been researching, obviously, on Western spirituality, especially now that we are now based back in France, and it's been extremely rich. And obviously, understanding how this relationship with death emerges through history. And when I mean death, I mean also the idea of things disappearing. And obviously, it's all linked to a not so old religious form of relationship with history, where we have been obsessed with the idea of the void, or that basically after death, this is it. After death, there is no thing left after the disappearance of those practices, of those languages. This is it. Well, I have my own experiences in that, understanding that actually, no, I do not believe this is it. There is actually many different ways to gather again those knowledges, and not only through the digital ways. I think the digital tools offered us maybe a very interesting perspective on how do we maintain a little bit of the vibration alive. But basically, not that long ago, we were documenting with a dreamer from the Mapuche community. The Mapuche people are indigenous people who have preserved a lot of their ancient knowledge because they have been able to avoid the complete annihilation of their culture. Basically, they've been able to avoid the destruction of their cosmology. And still nowadays, in the Mapuche communities in the south of Chile, you will find the position of the Peumatufe. So the Peumatufe is the dreamer, the official dreamer of the community. What's his role? Well, his role is to basically gather informations from where? Well, mostly from the future, because that's where that's how this society basically deals with time. We will ask the dreamer, the Peumatufe, to get the information of who is coming next week, not only how the weather is gonna be, but basically all the events which are coming towards him, which is something very related, actually completely linked to the fact that you will find in shamanic cultures a lot of this ability to peek into the future, let's say for hunting. And I'm not saying this only related actually to psychoactive form of shamanism. I don't know who is watching us now, but basically there is this knowledge that yes, you can gather informations in a different time. So basically this knowledge is now slowly being investigated by, let's say, a more globalized, westernized form of science under especially the name of quantum physics and so on. And what you understand is that obviously this field of information is not only can you bring this information from the future to the present, which is a very, very stunning, obviously, aspect of reality, which is slowly making its way into our world in the 21st century, but that you can also basically pick up elements of knowledge in the past. So, and in a sense, in the past, that in a way that I do not believe things completely disappear, or in a sense, knowledges are there to be picked up. You just need to make your path to that information. That's not an easy task. Definitely not, especially with our globalized society being on such a low consciousness level, I would say. But I do believe that what we've been seeing with the digital age is at the same time the acceleration into the destruction of this form of social relationship, but also the reopening of a possibility to re-understand our spiritual relationships under a different angle. Or in a way, I do see the digital tools, the digital age, as a sort of like a little maquette. How would you say that? A sort of like a miniaturized version of the spiritual consciousness. And that's a very, we're just so much at the beginning of tapping into a very different form of reality that it's impossible even to go further than just having such like ideas, suppositions about the way that such archives are actually very well be treated very, very differently soon, as long as we basically stop being obsessed with death. I hope it makes sense.
Well, the question was maybe very deep, but the answer was also very, very deep. Thank you. Coming back to India, can you explain us a little bit what is your relationship with this country? for you, Vincent, with Priscilla? How many times you've been here? What did you find here? What were your experience in terms of music, in terms of sacred music, in terms of relation with the people, with spirituality?
Wow, this is so deep, man. Again, I mean, I don't know India. I mean, I would never pretend, and I think nobody could even pretend that they know India. This is maybe the richest country on the
I can say
planet.
that even Indians cannot pretend or can't say that we
No,
know
I
India
guess
because it's
you know who can have an overview of this place, especially when you have still such a diverse land. It's incredible. There is so many things there. I don't know if you know you might probably know the work of the documentaries of Louis Malle, L'Inde Fantôme, from 1968 actually. Huh? I think he was there in very early 1968, a few weeks before May 68 in Paris and France and so on. And it gives a very, very, very beautiful look at Indian reality and the way Louis Malle himself, who was already a very famed French director at the time, give a very simple, very humble, I believe, account of his non-understanding of India. And it's very, very beautiful series of documentaries. I don't remember if there are 6 or 8 documentaries, but anyway, I would be happy to share them with you. They're very, very rich and so on. I guess obviously since 1968, India has changed quite a lot, and at the same time, I guess that's also the vision that a lot of maybe Westerners have. It seems that it's never going to change, that there is something extremely deeply rooted in the Indian communities, that it's so deep, so rich in terms especially of music and rituals. So I went there with Priscilla 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago. We were invited. It was only my second time in India. And again, just to state this, it's almost a place you want to avoid before being ready to kind of like fully engage into a very large, profound experience on how do music, how do spirituality, how do those forms of relationship inform everything. And that's very important. This is so much present everywhere. And so we were invited in Rajasthan, probably May 2018, to participate into a creation for a festival which was happening in Nagaur and in Jodhpur. And we decided to dedicate this creation, which was like, I think we stayed maybe 2 weeks total. So it was very short time. We had those 2 weeks to document with the community, a Sufi community of the shrine of Ajmer, which is the largest Sufi shrine in Southeast Asia, if I'm not wrong. An incredible place of pilgrimage, obviously. And so we decided to spend 1 week there in a shrine and around, documenting people and especially documenting Kawali music, all singers and musicians, the family of Kawals actually, and all the different elements happening around, all those moments of faith and deep devotion that people were having there. So from all this material that we gathered, thanks to the Shishti Foundation, who is basically holding the place for centuries now, we had then all those different materials to create a performance, which was to be shown at the Nagaur Fortress and then at the Jodhpur Fort. And so we had, I guess, only 3 or 4 days to edit. So we decided to work on different sequences. We cut different sequences. We tried to create a narrative, because actually the idea of the performance is that we would welcome the Kawal on stage with us. So they would basically interact with the images. They would sing on stage and they would sing with themselves in the films. They would have some different sounds at some point. So it was a mix of like music and live music, live cinema, in a form of in a theatrical form, to kind of question actually even the idea of modern day ceremonies in a sense, you know. It was very beautiful collaboration, very complicated on many levels because we didn't have really much time. It was very exhausting. But the film that you're going to see now, I mean, whenever you want, that we are premiering now, is a result of all this research, which is not the film we were showing on stage, which is another version, an edit specifically made to be seen in such a way, you know. I think it's 37 minutes long. And it's basically the last form to emerge from this site-specific creation we made back at the time. And obviously, again, a way for us to put this knowledge, those sounds, those images again in circulation and let people use them, show them, remix them. And again, with the idea that everything is movement and every little recording should be able to maintain an original movement. So then the idea of the remix in a way, you know, letting people take something and switch it, change it, give it a different form, and then to give it again, you know.
Somehow, I think you explained already. One of the questions we had was actually like the processes you have in order to create. But I think somehow you went already through that. So I would move on maybe now on the question to resonate a little bit more with what you were saying previously. Like, do you now consider yourself ready for India?
More than ever, yeah. No, I would actually love to stay in India for a long time.
Yeah.
To really
You have
deepen,
already identified some other communities, some other projects, some other people. You've been in touch already. You have already some projects here.
Yes, there's just so many things. How do again, you know? Wow. Obviously, there's many different ways, many different things I would love to document in India. But I guess more than anything would be to probably go visit some of the so-called indigenous communities all around India, and do some projects with them, and document them. Also, give them. Obviously, the fact of filming someone and is trying for us to put the light on this community, you know, to give it as some would say, a spot on the map. But I do believe it's a matter again of representation. Although this form of representation nowadays is trapped into an extreme saturation of information and images. Everybody is making images nowadays. Let's be frank, you know. The idea of like a documentary filmmaker like me going around the world, you know, with this camera to document all the richness it belongs to the past. It's sort of like, I think we're definitely coming from the 20th century in a way. We are definitely the extension of, I believe, a very beautiful way to look at reality, to celebrate the others, and bring a certain language, a language of cinema on top of that, you know, which is for me a very poetical way to address reality. But this is obviously also, this is almost gone, mon ami. Everybody is recording with their cell phone, with their smartphone, with so many devices all the time. And I'm saying this actually, local people do their own recordings nowadays. So it's a very big switch as well there, you know. I think you have to understand that local communities are sort of like taking care about their memory, even without knowing about it, in a sense, without obviously thinking about it. This is happening. You will have access to this data in a way, you know. Let's say, you know, in 50 years, I'm pretty sure you will still be able to access the local recording of a ritual filmed by a 8-year-old girl with a smartphone of her mom, and she made a 30-minute one shot, you know. Well, it might look crap in terms of framing, in terms of sound, but if you're looking for information, you would get it. You know what I mean? So it's a very interesting reflection to have there, because what is our goal? What do we expect to do there? We are not going to be able to fight against all those different images, all those different screens that everybody is having. But we're just trying to offer another alternative, which is again not about only documenting, but representing into a physical reality. That's why I'm very interested in like bringing such communities on a local form of performance. I would avoid the word stage, obviously, because that's not what we want. We don't want to stage reality, but it's a play on this idea of theater of life at the same time, you know. And to regain this, for example, that's what we're starting to do in France now. We're starting to go all around the country. We're getting a little truck, a little cinema truck, to be able to show films in villages and so on, and to bring this back to the level of everyday life, everyday community, away from the institutions, very probably, away from museums and so on, but really to use the public spaces. And so this use of public space, using images, sound, using those different forms of performances, that's what I would love to obviously experiment more in India. And as there is already such a deep tradition and ancient tradition of those public form of performances, I mean, there will be so much to explore there, definitely.
Exactly. That's very, very true. And actually, I have the chance to see it here, living in Madhya Pradesh, with all the different tribes with such rich cultures they have. So I can tell you that yes, you have to come, and you will definitely enjoy it. Yes, of course. So you were talking about the evolution, you know, and how we can make now records, films, and records. It's true, you can record with your mobile phone, or you can record, you know, MP3 or high quality audio, and same thing with a camera of a cell phone like this. And publishing have quite a really decent quality, right, of records. So the next question will be like, yeah, it's true. Somehow we are part of the previous century, the way some of us might make some music or record movies, filming movies. But there was an evolution with the internet, with the way we start to release our work as musicians, as filmmakers, which are those copyleft, the Creative Commons. So actually the way we are filming, we are producing, has also somehow also it created consequences also on the way we start to release our work, because the copyright that exists still nowadays somehow is really restrictive, no? And for someone like you, I imagine that it will be actually much more complicated to try to register everything, while actually it's so fresh, so new century to release all your material, all your production, using the copyleft, using the Creative Commons. Can you maybe, for the people who are watching us and who are not really familiar with those notions of copyright, copyleft, Creative Commons, explain a little bit what we are talking about?
Sure. Well, first thing, Thomas, let me state this. I do not believe we own anything, right? This is basically the basis of this idea. We are not the owners. We are not the owners of this planet. You know, we're just passers by. We're just like basically now for a very short time, and we're enjoying all this richness, this diversity, and basically what is left from all those others human beings before us. In that regard, I think it's a very interesting switch in the way we relate to reality, that at some point, and again, I won't go too deep into this, but quite recently in human history, we switched toward this idea of basically being into a ownership form of relationship. What I mean is that I think as artists, as poets, we as shamans, as basically any form of wisdom, we receive it from someone, from somewhere. And I do believe it's very simple. The mission is to pass it along. When it's in your hand, when that story, let's say I'm going to film a very old woman deep into the central jungles of Africa, deep in Gabon, and she will, maybe because I asked her, she will tell me the myth of their origins, the origins of those people. Well, obviously, me documenting that myth, I do not make that myth my own. You know, it's just a completely wrong idea. Then that myth, that story, is in my hands, or in a sense, I received it through my tool being a camera. I could have received it in my book. I could take notes. I could be an anthropologist as well. I'm not, or in a different sense, maybe, but that's going to be for another time. So it's there, and my goal, my mission is basically to share it along, to pass it along. When it's there, when you receive such a treasures of humankind, you take care of them. Let's say you receive a treasure at home. It's going to stay for 3 days, and then it leaves. Well, I'm going to take care of that treasure. You know, I'm like, hey, welcome home. This is my place. This is the way I look at reality. Look at my walls. There is a Buddha there, you know, and so on. I will introduce my treasures to basically my other subjective relationships in reality. All those different things I gathered. But then it's time to let it go, because it's not yours. It does not belong to anybody. It belongs to everybody. And so by passing it along, I would just try to give it in an even, if possible, if that doesn't sound too crazy, in even a better shape than when I received it. So if I receive that story coming from the most ancient time, from that woman in Gabon, I would try to polish it, but not in a sense to arrondir les angles. I don't know what would be the word in English there, but basically to give it even back to a very raw state, but very beautiful. So this is the way I look at copyright and copyleft. Basically, to me, copyleft is exactly in this idea of I receive something and I pass it along. And that's all I'm going to always do in my life, because that's the way life works. It's always been like this, man. Look at nature. There is no tree owning a forest. There is no basically ownership in all this. It's a constant cycle of evolution from one thing to the other. Then you have this idea of the copyright, which is very recent and completely absurd. Very stupid, because it reflects very much the interest of our commercialized capitalistic society. This is it. This will disappear. It might take some time, and nowadays, obviously, the people who want to maintain this form of like privatization on knowledges, on the most precious thing we do have as humankind, relationship to the living, to basically this extraordinary nature. When people will keep trying to privatize that. It might take quite a few generations to go back to this idea of sharing, or it might take faster. I'm trying to make it faster. That's all. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you again for sharing all those beautiful images and sounds with all of us once again. Merci beaucoup.
C'est un grand plaisir. Merci beaucoup.
I think, Kayal, I'm going to give you back the microphone, if I can say so, to you now. Merci, Vincent, once again. It was a really privilege
Thanks,
to
Thomas.
have the chance to have this talk with you. Yeah.
Well,
and I hope to host you very soon in India. again, hopefully soon as possible, you and Priscilla are most welcome.
That would be a dream.
Whenever you
Yeah.
want.
We'll make it work.
Great.
We'll see.
If that
Thanks a lot,
happens, I think
guys.
I'll be the happiest.
Yeah.
But no, thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you very much, Vincent, for this wonderful conversation. I think this conversation, even though a little longer than previewed, leaves a lot of questions and a lot of thoughts for people to reflect upon, from ownership, copyright, what is an artwork, what is a representation of an artwork, our heritage, technology, digital age, spirituality. I hope that this video and this conversation becomes a trigger for the audiences to think on these lines, which often we don't, especially in the current scenario when we are all sort of confined in our particular physical spaces. I think it's also a time to introspect a little bit about these things. At the same time, I will take this occasion to also insist our audiences, our viewers, to go to the website of Petit Planet, go and see the film, which is on theconfined.org. It releases today, and it will be only available for a couple of weeks. Have a look, experience the little moment of trance, of spirituality, what Vincent and Priscilla experienced a couple of years back. I think it'll touch you greatly, like it does to me and Thomas. So thank you very much, Vincent, once again.
For sure.
And
yes, thank you.
We'll be in touch. Have a
Pleasure.
lovely day.
Ciao.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Vincent.
Merci les amis.